Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever episode of the Defense Department, where I go ahead and discuss basically the defensive side to any sort of case, story, or etc. that is occurring within the commentary slash drama slash YouTube or other social media sphere. The first video of the Defense Department is going to be discussing Pyrocynical and the allegations that he is a groomer or a pedophile. The reason that I actually am making this video is because DefNoodles is a commentator that I very much enjoy. He gives out his opinion on stuff as well as brings stories to the forefront of a lot of people's minds and whatnot. But he made a video regarding the Pyrocynical situation as well as several tweets thereafter.
Let's go on a trip for Christmas. Let's let go. I know I won't miss this. Let's forget what we've done this year.
Basically saying that Pyro is a pedophile, he should be in jail, things along these lines, that he's admitted to committing a crime. I do not see it the same way, and I'm going to explain my case to you guys. If you guys do not know, I personally have a history in criminal justice. That is what I study. I've studied criminal justice for several years now. I have an associate's degree. I'm about to be getting my bachelor's degree. From there, I plan on going into a law school where I will study criminal defense as well as specialize in drug laws in particular. But as a whole, I do very much enjoy the legality of stuff, the legal process, and basically that's what we're going to cover today. Now, I have to say I am not a lawyer, not yet, so take what I say with a grain of salt. This is not legal advice. This is just me reciting legal information that I have found. And so let's go ahead and start off with the story of Ivory versus Pyrocynical. Now, a few months back, a kid named Ivory came forward with a story that he and Pyrocynical had traded sexually explicit text messages revolving around their fursonas. Now, if you don't know what a fursona is, essentially people who partake in the furry fetish, they have this representation of themselves where they act out kind of sexual ideas through this mental character. Pyrocynical lives in England and Ivory lives in Pennsylvania. Now, in both areas, 16 is the legal age of consent. Now, the issue comes in that Ivory was 15 at the time that Pyrocynical and him were messaging. Now, Pyrocynical did admit that he did send sexually explicit text messages regarding their personas to Ivory to him at the age of 15. Now, what Pyro further states is that he was unaware of Ivory's age, and that due to this, he's not a pedophile, not a groomer, or etc. Now, I think that's the wrong case to make. That is not what makes him not a pedophile, not a groomer, etc. You cannot use ignorance as a defense within the court of law. So you can't say, hey, I didn't know that was a crime. If you say, hey, I didn't know that was a crime, you're definitely going to get convicted. And you also can't just say, oh, well, I didn't know their age, because that will also get you convicted. The real issue here comes into how sexting, as well as other laws around the manipulation of a child for sex, in a way, it's how they're written that allows Pyro, in my view, to get off scot-free. Now, before we get into that, I do want to say, on a moral level, is Pyrocynical in the wrong? Absolutely he is. He should have done his further due diligence to figure out the real age of this kid. He should not have been just randomly sending these messages to whoever would do it with him, as he claimed he was. And there's a lot of other things that Pyro clearly did horribly wrong here, and at the very least, he's extremely stupid, and at the very worst, he's a pedophile. Either way, I'm not going to argue for any of these things, but I am going to tell you what the law says about these things. Now, the first thing that we have to worry about is where would Pyrocynical be tried? Now, we do have a pretty tight connection with Europe, and the person who the crime was committed against is in the United States. So the odds are Pyro, if he were to be tried for this, he would be tried in the United States because, it's not like Russia where if we ask them to bring him over here so we can try him, usually Russia would be like, no, go fuck yourself. But Europe will usually allow us to go ahead and extradite individuals for trial or to press charges on them. Now, there's the possibility that the UK might say, oh, well, we want to try it on our end. Either way doesn't make a whole lot of difference because Pennsylvania and the UK have very similar sexting laws. So let's go ahead and look at the sexting laws for Pennsylvania first, and then we'll go from there. So, Pennsylvania's teen sexting law and penalties. In 2012, Pennsylvania enacted a law prohibiting the sexting of sexually explicit images by minors younger than 18 years of age. Sexually explicit images includes those involving nudity or depicting a minor's genitals, pubic area, breast, or buttocks in a sexual manner. Now, here's the thing that's important. It specifically states that nudity, not just of the minor, but nudity in general, can constitute as sexting. So, Pyro claims that he never sent Ivory any nudes of himself, and he also claims that Ivory never sent him nudes. Ivory also states that nudes were not exchanged, and it was all completely verbal. Now, one thing that I do recall from Pyrocynical's video is he offhandedly mentioned that there was like some sort of furry images traded with Ivory. Now, this could fall under, if that did happen and he sent him furry pictures, this could mean that it would fall under the sexting laws. However, typically, if the nudity was not of Pyro himself or of, another child or something along those lines, child sexting laws would not apply. At that point, it would be the obscenity laws, which were put in place to where you are not allowed to show a minor obscene images, aka you cannot show them porn. So realistically, already off the bat, when we look at Pennsylvania's teen sexting laws, it specifically only states images. It does not state written text messages fall under this. Now, further, the next thing that would be questioned is, okay, if it doesn't fall under sexting laws, then maybe it would fall under the sexual solicitation of a minor. Now, this would actually be the next law that people would go for, or prosecutorial attorneys would go for, if sexting laws don't work. Now, how this law works is essentially if let's say if Pyro sexted or texted Ivory and said something like, oh, I want you to suck my dick, right? This would mean that it would be looked at in the court of law as he is asking him to suck his dick. He is soliciting a sexual act from this minor through stating that would be something that he wanted. Now, here's where our other issue comes in. If this law were to be applied, you would then have to make the argument in the court of law that Pyrocynical, the sexting or the texts that he sent Ivory that were of an obscene nature, you'd have to argue that he actually wanted to do those things. So, for example, one of the things that I kind of remember from the whole furry text messages and things was stuff like, belching into his mouth and then consuming him whole, which is something obviously that is only able to be done in a fantasy register. It is not something that can be actually done. It's not a sexual act that can be brought into real life. So to say that Pyrocynical was actually soliciting these insane, absurd sexual acts really would not make much sense. The only thing that you can say is that the personas represent the people themselves, and then therefore they should be taken seriously as sex acts that Pyrocynical or Ivory were attempting to induce or solicit. I do not see a actual judge, however, saying yet or taking this seriously because of the absurd nature and the impossible nature of the sexual acts discussed. Now, typically saying, hey, it's a fantasy would not get you off from a crime, right? If you're a 20-year-old and you text a 16-year-old and you're like, hey, or in this case, let's say you're a 20-year-old, you text a 15-year-old, you're like, oh, hey, I want you to suck my dick, and then you say, oh no, it was just a fantasy. I didn't really want you to suck my dick. I was just thinking about it. That's not the same situation, because that saying, oh, I want you to suck my dick, is something that could be brought into the real world and officially done by the child to the adult. And it's much easier to argue solicitation under that context. However, this context of it being something so absurd, first of all, there's not much precedent within the courts for such a thing, which is why lolly back in the day was so fucking, and still is such a big thing within the legal context of like, should this be allowed or should this not be allowed? Because things that are, fairy tale in nature are typically not covered under the law in the same way. So far, we've covered the sexing laws. Those only cover actual nudes either sent to or received from the child. Then we have sexual solicitation, which would not, in my view, hold up because there were never any, messages saying, hey, I want you to do this sex act upon me. It was simply, these persona ideas that were absurd and extrapolated to this, like, insane level. So that would not work. And the only thing that I could see potentially would be the obscenity laws if Pyro did send Ivory a, say, furry picture that was sexual in nature or meant to arise a sexual response from an individual. Oh, and then the other thing that's getting thrown around a lot is the idea of grooming. Now, the idea of grooming under the law essentially means that you bring up somebody who is under the age of 18 and you gain their trust. So let's say you meet them at 15, you gain their trust, and then you maintain a relationship with them until they are of legal age, and then you engage in sexual activity.
Did you actually groom Connor? No. Please look up what grooming is, and please stop coming to my live calling me that. No one groomed anyone. We saw it. No, you didn't. You saw us kiss. Internet chat room with the intention of committing a sexual offense. Sexual offense did not happen. Kissing just happens. Like, people kiss all the time. Yes, he's a minor. 13 and 19 is illegal, yes. But the police were already involved.
Now, this happens, again, most commonly with, say, like somebody who's at the age of 20 or above, and the kid is, say, usually below 18, because, that's the general, age of consent within the United States. But let's just say a 25-year-old is talking to a 16-year-old over the internet, maybe like Onision. I don't know, maybe like Onision. And then they maintain this friendly relationship, and then after they turn a legal age, they begin, having sex. The reason this is illegal is because, the reason that it's illegal is because you've blurred the power lines and power dynamic between the adult and the child, and there is still that adult and child kind of power dynamic happening, even though that child is now of a legal age of consent, because just like your parents will always remain your parents, people who you see as an authority figure as a child will typically remain an idol or some sort of authority figure over you in the future. But so the grooming laws, for this reason, if Pyro did continue the sexualized conversations with Ivory after he found out that he was not, legal at the beginning of the relationship, could actually constitute grooming. It simply depends on the nature of the conversations between Ivory and Pyrocynical after it was found out that Ivory was not forthcoming with his age at the time. That whole situation, we know that Pyro did talk to Ivory after he turned 16. We do not know the nature of those conversations, I do not believe. If we do know those the nature of those conversations, please bring those forth, because I would be curious to see those. That's the main issues here. Is Pyro a degenerate? Yes. Is Pyro fucked up, and did he really do something horrible by talking to a 15-year-old in a sexual manner that way? Yeah, absolutely. Should we keep our eye on him to see like if there's any other weird shit that comes out? Fuck yeah, we should. But at the moment, based on what the evidence that we have now, did Pyrocynical either sexually solicit something from a minor? Did he sext a minor according to the UK/Pennsylvania laws? Also, again, the UK and Pennsylvania have very similar child sexting laws. Did he show obscene images to a child, or did he groom a child? According to what we have now, the answer, in my view, would be no. Now, again, not an attorney, all right? This is just, me reciting legal information that I have found and how I view it in my own mind here. Well, thank you guys for joining me during the first episode of the Defense Department. It's been really interesting to research into this whole Pyrocynical situation, especially because I did like Pyrocynical. I always watched Pyrocynical. He was one of those people that I looked up to in the commentary community as like, oh hey, he has pretty decent content. I was never like a giant Pyro stan or anything like that. There's some people out there that are obviously huge stans and shit. So this has definitely made me look at him differently, as it should anybody else. You definitely should look at him differently. But to say that he has committed a crime and he should be in jail is just, it's a big statement to make, right? That's a big jump to make based off of the evidence that we currently have. And so, yeah, we need to keep our eye on him and stop spreading misinformation, because some people out there, including DefNoodles at the moment, I feel like DefNoodles is on this like big brigade to take down Pyro, and I get it. Like, if you think that he's a pedophile, which I understand why you would, it's like, I get why you would be on this big brigade, but to say that, like, to try to show a bunch of lawyers and shit, like, saying a specific thing in regards to a different case entirely, it's just, it doesn't hold up, and it's just not good to try to push a legal aspect if you don't actually have any experience in the law. So, that's it.
Spaced out of my head to the depths of the universe.